Please be seated. The court is now back in session. The floor is given to Insari's defense to put question to this witness. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good afternoon, Your Honors. Good afternoon to everyone in and around the courtroom, and good afternoon, sir. Let's pick up where we left off. I believe we were speaking about PON right before the lunch break. And as I understand your testimony, PON and TE, but primarily PON, had the exclusive authority to add who would be copied to certain documents that were being decoded and were headed towards K1. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And in fact, if I understand your testimony correctly, and if we look at your first statement, it would appear that Pong did not have that authority. Pong, that is the individual who was the chairman of 870, or he's been referred to as being charge of 870 and various other places.
Yes, that was the case for Pong. First you said about Pon, not Pong. Pong did not have the authority to oversee the copy through line.
Now, may I ask, where is it, how do you know that? What is the basis of your information?
The basis was based on the practice since I was still in the jungle, so it started from there. Pong never come to oversee my work and never interfere with the work, either from the technical point of view or from the point of view of the verification of any telecrime. He did not have that authority.
All right. Now, let me see if I understand this correctly. You're making the assumption that because in the jungle, Pong did not interfere with your work, Pong, who was in charge or the chairman of 870, had no authority to override Pon, who was his subordinate, or at least in a subordinated position.
Yes, that is correct. Although Pong was about Pon, his supervisory role about Pon was only in charge of political training, but for the confidentiality in relation to telecrime or the technical aspect of the telegram, he did not have that authority.
All right. And as far as your understanding is concerned, when you say technical aspect, that would include, in addition to encoding or decoding, who would actually be the target of the telegram.
Could you please repeat your question?
All right. Let's speak primarily about telegrams that are going to K1. Okay, so that's what I'm referring to. And if I understand you correctly, you're saying that the technical aspect of Pon's work entailed also who would be copied. He had that discretion.
Yes, that is correct. He had the authority in the copy-through line.
Now, let's talk about that a little bit. Beyond writing copied to, do you have any knowledge that he had the authority to ensure that that the document was actually physically delivered to the person that he assumed should be copied?
Regarding the management by PON as to who will be the recipients in the copy-through line and whether the messages would reach those intended recipients were beyond my knowledge. Because that will be part of the arrangement by the internal team.
Thank you. And that's what I want to make sure that we are clear in our understanding. What you're telling us is part of his technical function was to designate who he thought should be copied. Can we agree on that?
Yes, I agree on that point.
Now,
he also had the authority to exclude any recipients in any circumstances. That was his discretion, as he knew some uncles would be absent, so there was no need to include those names in the copy-through line.
all right. So he had that authority over and above Pol Pot to exclude people who he thought either are not around or should not receive messages. Is that what you're telling us?
For the internal team, as he worked also inside, he would know who would be present or who would be absent or was overseas. For that reason, he had the authority to include the targeted recipients. But of course, he did not have the override authority above Pol Pot.
Now, before we broke for lunch, you told us that Pon subscribed to and adhered to the principle of secrecy. You told us that he didn't say anything about his internal activities in K1. Am I clear on that?
Yes, that is correct. He adhered to the 4 principles strictly.
And so as you sit here today, you cannot say with any degree of certainty what exactly Pon did or did not do within the confines of K1.
The question whether he did or did not do anything within the confines of K1, the thing is he would not do anything to reveal internal secrecy toward outside. And this does not mean that he should do or should not do anything within the confines of K1.
Exactly. And so as you sit here today, are you not presuming or making presumptions when you're telling us what would happen to a document once it was received by Pon?
It was not a presumption. That was the fact. That was what happened through my experience, through my many years communication and contact with Pon.
Okay, but because we need to move on, I thought you just told us that you had no communication or experience with Pon with respect to his work in K1. You just told us that.
The experience, when I said that, it refers to his stance, his maintenance, his maintaining of secrecy and not to leak it outside. That was the experience, his work experience that I referred to. I think there is a misunderstanding here.
Okay, my apologies. Let's move on and see where we go with this. Now, on September 3, 2012, on page 38 of the English transcript, it's Khmer page 30, French page 38. We may need some clarification here. You indicate Pon and Tay worked directly with Pol Pot, and they had the role of the secretaries. All the instructions that they gave to them, that they gave to me, were not their own instructions. They were instructed from the above, or that they took notes in the meeting with the standing committee before those instructions were relayed them to me. Do you see that? Do you recall telling us that?
Yes, that's what I stated on that day.
All right, now let's look at this. And first, let me ask you, did you ever attend any standing committee meetings?
No, I never.
And you told us about secrecy, and you told us that Pon adhered to secrecy. Did Pon ever tell you that he attended standing committee meetings, and while there, he was acting as in a secretarial capacity, taking notes?
No, he did not. However, what I knew was that there was the handwriting of Pon on by the telegram, including the instructions from Pol Pot for me to decode all the text that Pon received from the upper echelon. And most of those texts or messages were in Pon handwriting.
Thank you. Now, we have limited amount of time, but my time would run into next week. And I want to make sure I finish today. So if you would just answer my questions. Then if there's time left over, you can talk about anything else you wish, provided the President allows you to. My question to you again, and let me repeat it. Did Pon ever tell you that he attended standing committee meetings, and then he was acting in a secretarial capacity, taking notes? It's a yes or it's a no.
President, the question has been asked and has been answered.
Now, let's look at this again, the same passage from the beginning. Pon and Te worked directly for Pol Pot. They had the role of the secretaries. Can you please tell us what is the actual basis of your knowledge, if in fact we are to believe you, that Pon never told you anything about his activities inside K1?
Based on what he said, he did not say anything regarding the meetings at K1. He did not say anything about the secrecy from this brother or that brother. He only spoke about the technical aspect of the encryption. He only talked about the work, and he did not say anything else without or not related to the work. He only spoke to me regarding the nature of the work.
Thank you. Now, sir, did he ever tell you that he had the role of the secretary for Pol Pot or the standing committee or any other committee within K1?
Pon did not tell me that he was a secretary, but when Pon went to receive instructions or took notes of Pol Pot's words, it means that he acted as his personal secretary in taking those notes. And that is my understanding. Because the person who took notes would act in the capacity as a secretary.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Now, is it based on that you then say that Pon would have been present in standing committee meetings taking notes? In other words, you've made one assumption. Now, are you making the second assumption based on the first?
That is correct. I made assumption based on the notes that he took when Pol Pot gave instructions. And that also the practice while we were still in the jungle. When Pol Pot had a message to deliver, he would call Pond to go and see him.
Very well. Now, did you know a gentleman by the name of Un Tan?
I replied on a number of occasions that I did not know this person.
All right. Well, Mr. Un Tan appeared before this tribunal and gave evidence. And I would like to go over some of his testimony in relations to telegrams and get your opinion in light of what you've told us thus far for the last 3 days. And I'm referring to E1/86.1. The transcript, I'm going to go through several pages of the transcript, or partial pages. 13 June 2012, Khmer 00815998, French 00818066, English 008179, and it looks like a 57, although it's on page 32. And let me begin. We'll go slow and see how it goes. Here, the gentleman indicates that he became a guard in 1970 through 1975, and all the way to 76 and 77. And that it was Pong who assigned him to those tasks. On the following page, he goes on to say that I was tasked with guarding the vicinity in the meeting places, and then he was there all the way into the time when the Vietnamese came. Going on to page 62, which would be Khmer page 00816023, French 00818098 to 99, and English 00817987, or page 62. There's a question posed by the same gentleman that questioned you on behalf of the prosecution. And it goes, I just want to ask you, were there any telegrams? Were there telegrams used by K1? Answer, telegrams were used at K1. However, I do not know where the telegrams would be sent to, although I know that such telegrams did exist at K1. Question, and could you tell the court where the telegraph office or place from which telegraphs were sent and received, where that office was? Answer, at that time, there were letters from Pol Pot sent through telegrams, and Pong, it's spelled Fong, but I believe it's Pon, was the one who was in charge of this, was in charge of these letters to ensure that they could be sent outside. Going on to the next page, he goes on to answer, indeed, there are two different individuals, Pong, in charge, overly in charge, and Fon was in charge of the telegram section. Did you have any responsibilities in relation to the telegrams into the office where Pon worked the telegram site? Answer: there was some young people who were subordinates to Pon who carried the letters to me, who presented them to Pol Pot. Question. So I'll try to summarize it if I can, and please correct me if I'm wrong. Pon, at the telegraph site, would receive telegrams, and then his messengers would bring them to you, and you would hand them to Pol Pot. Is that a correct description of how the telegrams traveled? Answer: yes, it is correct. Now let me stop right here before we go on to what else we can learn from this gentleman. Were you aware of any of this?
President, witness, please wait the prosecution. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Since I'm the gentleman in question who asked those questions, let me see if I can pronounce the words as I pronounce them then. The individual at the telegram office, I did not refer to that person as Pon, as my learned friend has been representing. Both I and the witness pronounced that name as Pang. And the witness corrected me when there was confusion as to the way that one pronounces the names. And he said there were two people. One is Pong, being the man whom this witness has described as the head of Office S71. And then there was a Pang, ending with G, outside, who was in charge of telegrams. I want to make sure we understand those names clearly, and then my friend can take it further from here. But it was a different name that we were discussing, not Pon.
Let me. We're working with an English transcript, and unfortunately, both of us are foreigners to this language, and our pronunciations may be off. But perhaps the gentleman can assist us here. Do you know who, if there was another telegram section within K1 other than the one that you've been talking to us for over the last 3 or 4 days, which you said on the inside it was Pon who was in charge of?
No, there was no any other office dedicated to that task other than the one supervised by Pon. It provided that for the telegram section, it was under the responsibility by Pon and Pong, and I did not have any responsibility there. I was only in charge of the unit at the primary school, as I said, and I was in charge of the technical aspect. As Pong, he was responsible for overseeing the various offices subordinate to Office S71. Pong was above me, and he was also above Pon as well. and he was also above the person who responded or in the messages. The correspondent was foreigners, and he did not understand the telegram as much as I did.
All right. Well, let me make sure that we all are on the same level of understanding. In reading this part of Mr. Untan's testimony, when he's referring to Pon, or Fong as it's pronounced, or as it's spelled out, can you please tell us if you were aware of anybody else in K1 by the name of Fong who would have been in charge of the only telegram unit within K1 as you understood it at the time?
Witness, the President. Witness, please hold on. Prosecutor, you may proceed.
Again, I think my friend is at risk of misrepresenting the evidence. I'm reluctant to do this in front of the witness. It may well be appropriate to excuse the witness for 10 minutes and we can discuss this. The other witness, Mr. Uon Tan, was not discussing an internal K1 unit. He was discussing a different unit. I don't want to say any more than that because I don't want to be accused of leading this witness, but there is scope here for confusion, and we're dealing with 3 different languages. We're at your disposal, Your Honours, but it may well be appropriate to deal with this in the witness's absence, and then perhaps for the judges to ask questions and clarify the names in Khmer.
Mr. President, we just heard from the witness that to his knowledge there was only one telegram operating unit within K1. Now, if the prosecution is suggesting that there is more than one telegram section that was headed by someone that's similar to a gentleman by the name of Pon, then perhaps they can present that evidence at some other point in time. But I'm entitled to pursue this. If he doesn't know, then it shows the limit of his knowledge within what is happening in K1. Either way, I'm entitled to explore this.
President. Mr. Nong Supong. Can you clarify the telegram office you was attached to and the internal telegram office, because it appears confusing? Can you clarify it? For example, there was the name by Pong, who was in charge of both the internal and external telegram office, and there was another man by the name of Pon. He was supposed to be in charge of your unit, and there was another man by the name of Pong as well. So at K1 you said that Pong was the head of telegram office at K1, but you also mentioned the name Pong. Did this name exist at the time? Response. With respect, Mr. President, the three names Pong, Pang, Pon, actually in the previous statements I did not see Pon, but Pang and Pang were the supervisors. But for as far as telegram unit was concerned, only Pang and Pon were in charge. But the witness earlier who mentioned the name Pang may have been confused, because Pang and Pon were the people in charge. I think that probably the person might have confused it with the name of Pang, because he was of ethnic minority in Cambodia, so he might have confused Pang with Pon. And Pang, who was in charge of telegram decoding, was myself, and there was no any other Pang. It was my name actually, Pang, who was in charge of decoding messages. But my office were actually located at Sotiruh Primary School with other young staff members over there. The President. Counsel, you may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, it would appear from Mr. Un Tan's testimony that he was the one that actually physically delivered all telegrams to Pol Pot. Nothing about Pon taking them to Pol Pot, but him. Do you know whether that was the procedure?
Your Honours.
President, witness, please hold on. Mr. Prosecutor, you may proceed.
I'm sorry that I have to keep interrupting, but there is nothing in that evidence that would suggest, that could be reasonably read as meaning that the witness, Un Tan, said he was the only person who ever carried the letters. That's a misrepresentation of that evidence.
Let's go back. Were you aware that these telegrams were given to Un Tan to hand deliver to Pol Pot? Were you aware of that?
No, I was not. because it was, as what I explained, there were times when the situation was stable and there was another situation following the arrest of Pond. And when you ask me to describe the situation of delivering the message to Pol Pot, and it is, once again, my personal understanding, you fail to mention the specific time period. If it was sometime until mid-1978 when Pon was still there, nobody was in charge of a telegram office other than Pon. But if there was instance of direct delivery to Pol Pot, it could have been sometimes close to the liberation or the fall of the regime, because at that time the situation was chaotic. So you may conduct further research as to which specific year you are referring to.
Well, that's why I started, if you may recall, sir, by recalling his testimony that he was there 75, 76, 77, when Pon was still there. But can you tell us, did you ever see Pon physically deliver directly a message that you had prepared to Pol Pot inside K1?
I never saw it when Pon was working at K1. I only had the authority to deliver the message to Pon's office. That was it.
That's my point. Once you make that delivery to Pon's office, you don't know what Pon actually does because you're not in K1 and you have no access to K1.
Yes, you are right. I did not know what Pon did with the message.
Not in a position today, as you sit here, to agree or disagree with witness Ontan, because he was on the inside of K1 and you were on the outside of K1.
Yes, you are right. I did not know whether or not Tan had the authority to deliver the message directly to Pol Pot. Because as you may see the testimony of Mr. Eung Tan, my messenger only sent the messages to the security guards of K1, and then we handed in to Tan. Probably at that time, Pon was removed or disappeared.
All right, but then again, here you are making a presumption. You're drawing a conclusion. You're assuming this, right? That last part of your answer.
It was my assumption that once Pon disappeared, Tan took his place and he could deliver this message directly.
Okay, thank you. Now, in your testimony on the 29th of August, 2012, page 49 in English, Khmer is 00, 2661, French 51 to 52. There's a question concerning Pol Pot, and part of your answer is, as for Pol Pot, he was a person who oversaw every sector and every field. He had the right to say anything concerning anyone. And I take it you stand by that answer that you gave.
Could you please repeat the portion of my earlier statement? I could not really catch what you have just read out. I could have only talked about the messages delivery.
Well, now we're speaking about Pol Pot. Pol Pot, the individual, Pol Pot, and his authority at the time, as you understood his authority to be. You said at one point that he had the right to say anything concerning anyone. Was that your understanding at the time concerning Pol Pot's power and authority?
Yes, as for the authority as well as the instruction for message correspondence, he had the authority and power to say anything about it. He had the say in all aspects of management, irregardless of the field. It would encompass politics, economy, and other aspects.
Precisely. And to make sure, if we look at your statement, and this is a partial transcription of the audio that was done pursuant to, I believe it was the Kyu Sampon team, and I'm referring to D200/9.13, and it's Khmer 00837642, French 00843075, and English 00838744. This is something that is not in the summary, but it is in, you did say this on tape. You said, yes, just Uncle Pol Pot. All affairs rested with Uncle Pol Pot. Uncle number 1. And so that you would agree and you would stand by this statement that you gave to the investigators, that all affairs rested with Uncle Pol Pot, Uncle number 1.
The President. Witness, please hold on. The prosecutor, you may proceed.
Well, Your Honours, we've now heard the defence complain for several days about speculative evidence. This is a perfect example. My learned friend is seeking now to ask the witness about the affairs of senior leadership and the relative powers of the various members of the leadership. I refrained from asking questions along these lines because I realised, once the witness had told me that he didn't know much about the internal workings of the leadership, that was a futile exercise. And I think my friend should be directed to follow the same approach.
Mr. President, that's precisely the point. if the gentleman did not know the internal workings of the leadership, quote unquote. But at the same time, he's saying that all affairs rested with Uncle Pol Pot. It is our rightful submission that all these telegrams are going directly to Pol Pot before he decides who else would get them, irrespective of who is noted as to be copied. That's our submission. And if this gentleman at the time believed, understood, knew that everything rested with Pol Pot, that's fine. If he was speculating at the time when he made this statement, then so be it. Either way, we'll have an answer.
The President, the objection is not sustained. Witness is directed to respond to the question. Witness. I am basing my statement on the content of the telegram to be sent out. What I am trying to say is that each and every telegrams to be sent out, even if they were supposed to be sent to 870 committee or to senior brothers or so, Uncall number 1 was always there in the telegram. So every message or telegrams was addressed to brother number 1. He was the first and foremost person to receive the telegram. So everything must have been kept within his knowledge. But as for his authority and power, I did not know. I did not know the scope of his authorities and power. But as far as the authority to receive telegrams, I can say with certainty that every telegrams there was the name of Uncall number 1. That's what I have come across. So each and every message, there was his name.
Thank you. Mr. President, I'm about to go into the next topic, which may take a little bit past the break, and also it might be good to, if we could have the break now, so I could streamline and reduce perhaps my questioning. With your leave, I will, respectfully requesting that we break at this time. But I'm prepared to go forward for the next 15 minutes, but I just...
The President. The time is now appropriate for adjournment. We are going to adjourn for 15 minutes. We will resume at 20 to 3. Court officer is instructed to facilitate the place for the witness to rest, and we should be back by 20 to 3. The court is now adjourned.